Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our budget meeting. I'm just going to pass it over to Alan Martins right away to kind of explain the process, so we'll go from there.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council. So Shelley has prepared the budget package with input from all of the managers. Usually what council's done in the past is we've had administration go through each section at a time, and then council asks questions for clarification, just so that everybody gets a good idea of what's in the budget. At that time, we generally don't debate what's in there, but just to let everybody know what is in there. Once we've gone through each section and have asked all the questions, then we can go back and then debate what should be in there, deliberate what shouldn't be in there, deliberate things that council would like to see over and above in there. So that's about all I'll say, and with that, I will turn it over to Shelley.
Thank you, and through the chair to mayor and council. So I'm just going to start right at the very beginning of your packages, and just start by going through the City of Brooks budget process. I'll try and be fairly brief as to not take too much time and get right to the meat and potatoes of the budget, but it is important that we understand the process and that we know what type of budget we've tried to collaborate on. So we started this budget process back in about 2014-15, and it's just a good process so that staff can actually propose a complete budget to council, and which is aligned with council's strategic focus areas and with our financial policy. Basically, the budget will be reviewed. All of the changes made to the 2021 budget are reviewed. In fact, everything that's been considered by administration, whether it is recommended or not, is also reviewed. So once a review is complete, of course, council can choose to make changes to the proposed budget, and then we would at that time be able to answer any questions and quantify the changes that council might want, so we can see what those impacts are to our residents. So the city's proposed budget is broken down into three main sections. The first is the base budget, and our base budget is really our status quo budget for each department that has been developed over several years. But it's the required budget to perform the services at the current service levels that have been established by council. So we will review the base budget and propose changes to the base budget, which would include inflationary or contractual changes, as well as changes to economic assumptions. And the implementation of these changes don't necessarily affect our service levels, but rather allow us to continue on the services at the same level without affecting the way we deliver those services. Ideally, that base budget should be adjusted by inflation each year, but typically we don't really apply an inflation rate. We just identify some required adjustments based on major inflationary or contractual changes. And as we're going through that, I will introduce and explain most of the proposed changes to the base budget section once we get there. The second section of the budget is, we call them decision packages, and those are basically any additions or deletions to the base budget specific for that budget year. So they could include proposed increases to service levels, extended services or new positions, and some of the proposals may be ongoing expenses, so it might not, they might apply to this, be brought in this year, but they might affect future years, which means they'd have to be added to the base budget in the next budget. And in fact, when we go through the base budget, you'll see us adding decision packages that had been approved in the previous budget, so we'll be adding that to the base budget because at that time they were ongoing. Decision packages could also include one-time or non-repetitious operating expenses, which may help enhance internal processes or maintain some of our preventative maintenance programs. So if something maybe needs to be maintained every 5 years, you may see an expense like that that isn't repetitious or annual. And of course, they could include proposals brought forward by council or community groups, or through specific complaints through our complaint tracking system. And then the third, the final component of our budget, of course, is our capital budget. So our capital budget includes proposed vehicle equipment replacements, capital programs, and new capital projects. So at the starting point of our capital budget is always what is scheduled to happen based on our 10-year capital plan. So that's where we start. And all of the projects or the replacements are then analyzed by administration and decided whether they should be brought forward or whether they could be deferred or canceled altogether based on the current needs of the city at this time. And of course, a recommendation to that effect would be included in the proposed budget. We also will look at, we are in the 4th year of our 10-year capital plan, so there have been projects in previous years that were deferred, that were scheduled earlier and have been deferred. So we'll revisit those as well to see if they should, if administration would like to recommend those moving forward. I just wanted to mention, and the information is all there. I know there's an abundance of information in this package, so I'll try and simplify things, but only the portion of the projects, the capital projects that are funded from operations will affect our tax rate, or will affect the amount of property taxes that we need to collect. Many of our capital projects are funded by specific reserves or grant programs. And for that, I've also attached at the back of your package some continuities of those major reserves and grant programs, as well as the policies that kind of guide our financial planning process. So with that, as we like to do every year, we start our review off with kind of a quick review of the results from our citizen budget public consultation platform. As most of you should know, or probably know, we did put out a budget simulation exercise which ran from October 4th to November 15th of this year. It is an exercise that our residents can partake in, where they are kind of tasked with looking at each department, or actually not department, but we call them budget areas. So they could be specific areas of different departments. And they're kind of tasked with showing if they would like to see those services increased or decreased or stay the same. There's lots of information on each of those budget areas, which is part of our reason for doing it, to inform our residents. And they can use a sliding scale to show where they'd like to have things. And it also calculates what the impact to their property tax would be. As we know, it's easy to increase services, but usually there's a financial impact, which means we'd have to pass that on. So just to, you can move to the next one, Bruce. Just to review the participation, who participated. Basically, we had 258 participants, with 206 of them completing at least a third of the questionnaire. The 206 represents about 1.4% of our population. So with this survey, one of the things we've always been to strive to do, as well with the goal of informing our residents, is to get as much participation as we can. The more participation we have, then the more variety of comments and a better understanding of the population of a whole on where their consensus is. But that was the participants. So we'll just, I'm just going to go through each. I won't go through the report because it's very long, obviously. There's lots of comments, and I'll let you read that yourself. I'll just note that in all the budget areas, the approval rating of our current budget was basically the highest. So for everything, most people wanted to stay where we were currently. I will quantify that our current budget, this is done prior to us compiling our proposed 2022 budget. So our current budget is our 2021 budget with forecasted changes that we already knew about. So it's a pretty good indication. So I'm going to move through those budget areas really quickly just to give a brief overview. Corporate governance and support, we don't have a slider, but we like to ask a yes/no question. And this year we asked if the city should invest in a broader online public consultation platform to enable more input from residents and business owners. And 71.3% of the participants said yes to that. You will see a decision package for this expenditure when we get to the decision package parts. Moving on to Rcmp Services, again, I won't go through the comments. Can you just move back one, Bruce? I won't go through the comments. I've attached, the company has put together the highlighted comments, and I've attached all of them for you. I won't go through any of those. I just wanted to point out that the little number next to the comment, the 4 next to the first, indicates how many likes that got on this comment platform. So I think they've just showed the ones with the most likes. So with Rcmp Services, 40.8% of the participants said to keep, they would keep the budget the same, or keep the services the same. And the next largest group was voted for a slight increase in services. Next is municipal public safety, and that would include fire services and municipal enforcement. And with that vote distribution, 49.2% of the participants voted to keep it the same. Again, the next largest group voted for a slight increase in service. The next area is snow and ice removal. I just have a comment on this, one of the comments. One of them that had got many likes, I guess, was that they would expect the savings during winters with less snow to be put into a fund to help cover the costs in years with lots of snow. And I just wanted to confirm that we actually do that. We have a stabilization reserve, and that's exactly what we do. So just thought I'd comment on that comment. But as far as snow and ice removal, 47.5% of the participants voted to keep it the same. And again, the next largest group was indicating that they would pay more taxes for a slight increase. Stormwater maintenance is the next, and 55.3% voted to keep the same. The next largest group, again, a slight increase to that. Road and pavement maintenance being the next one is very similar. 50.8% voted to keep it the same. The next largest group, a slight increase. And then was community development services. 37.2% voted to keep it the same. And the next largest group voted for a slight decrease in those services. Recreation. I did have a couple comments on the comments. There's always several comments on recreation. On the additional comments, There are a couple of comments in regards to the water park, which technically would fall under parks and playgrounds, but they were put under recreation, so that's fine. 39.5% of the participants voted to keep the service levels the same, with the next largest group a slight increase. Athletic fields, 54.1% voted to keep it the same, and the next largest group would be a slight decrease in those services. And finally, parks and playgrounds, 46.8% voted to keep it the same, with the next largest group being a slight increase. We also asked some general questions. One of the ones that we asked was the 5 top issues which should receive the greatest attention. And I'll just read the top 5. They were crime, economic development, road maintenance, water quality, and recreation. And the other general question that I will comment on is what our residents felt the value was for their tax dollars. So the largest majority of the participants, 63.2, said they felt that they got fairly good value. So there are several other general questions and comments. And then we did ask some questions about the participants themselves, just to get a bit of demographics. We asked about their age, how long they lived in Brooks, whether they were renters and owners, and their household income. And that information is also there. I'll let you guys go through that. And then there were quite a few questions about the process itself. And of course, the answers were based on the people that actually completed the survey, not the ones that didn't complete it. So, but there were some comments about what they liked and didn't like about them and how they could improve it, and so on and so forth. So I think that's all. And then finally, there were some final comments. So lots to read about, and many relevant comments, some that may not be particularly relevant to budget, but that is the results of our citizen budget. So I will move right along. The next part of the budget package has to do with the proposed budget at hand. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a summary on some of our budget challenges and circumstances this year that we had to consider and will certainly be considered within the review. So the first thing that we'd like to point out is the impact of the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic. So for budget purposes, we didn't really make a lot of changes to our budget considering COVID. We see some impacts, but previously, really what we focused on is where we were most impacted, and that would be the collection of some of our revenues, particularly recreation revenues for our programs and facilities. And so for this budget, the following assumptions were made in regards to recreation revenues. We did say that our recreation expenses would remain the same in the budget, and that was the assumption in our 2021 budget. We may expect some favorable variances in recreation, especially if we do experience closures, but if they do exist, they can offset some of our revenue losses. So to be conservative, we've kept our expenses the same. As was done in the 2021 budget as well, the recreation revenues are budgeted at 50% of what they were pre-COVID, so 50% of what they were in our 2020 budget before COVID, I guess that's what pre-COVID means. So the reduction of these revenues quantifies to about $705,000. And as we did in 2021, in the 2021 budget, we said that we would fund that revenue loss from our operating contingency reserve. So we were able to do that in the budget due to our reactions when COVID came. So in 2020, administration went through our budgets and we came up with we quantified some offsets or some cuts to our budget that we could make, either deferring things or canceling certain things, but we recognized that we would have some expenses that and lost revenues due to COVID. And we actually found offsets of several thousand, over $1 million. Well, we have $1,031,000 that we were able to put into the reserve. Now, although we did have those unexpected costs and lost revenues, we received just over $1.4 million from the Municipal Operating Support Transfer Most grant. We didn't know that that grant was going to be coming to us when we did the offsets. So as a result of that, we were able to put the money into the operating contingency reserve, knowing that COVID would have financial impacts in future years. And the Most grant did end at the end of April in 2021. So basically that's our plan with recreation revenues in this budget. In addition to recreation revenues, property tax penalty rates were decreased in 2020, and that was done to help alleviate some of the financial hardship that our residents were having, especially the ones that were having trouble paying their property taxes. The reduction of those penalty rates, however, has created significant variances in our property tax penalty revenues of approximately $59,000, which was estimated at the time of putting this budget together. And that variance has been addressed within our base budget here. So another budget challenge that we had this year is one we've been talking about for quite a while, and now it's something that we've had to deal with, and that is our Rcmp contractual changes. So there's two significant changes this year that are anticipated in 2022. The first is the policing retroactive salary adjustment. So this is a one-time expense that will become upon us, we anticipate, in 2022. And this is a result of the Rcmp settling a collective bargaining agreement that has been negotiated retroactively back to 2015. The cost to fund those retroactive payments, which would apply to the City of Brooks, so the officers that we are responsible for, is approximately $728,000, and that's the number that we've been given by the Rcmp as an estimate. So that, although this retroactive payment would be a one-time expense, the increased salaries would now carry forward into future budgets, and we've accounted for that as well. The second part of the contractual changes is the change in the cost share formula due to population change. So as most of us know, we pay 70% of our applicable Rcmp costs based on having a population below 15,000. As there is a new federal census that was performed in this year, the results of that federal census will be out in February of 2022. And if our population is higher than the 15,000, our percentage that we are responsible to pay will jump to 90%, which has a significant impact on our costs. And we've estimated that impact to be approximately, so that would be effective April 1st, 2022, because that is the date that our Rcmp contract moves on, I guess. So we estimate the impact to be approximately $604,000 in the 2022 year, and that's the prorated amount. for the partial year. And moving forward, it would be approximately $801,000 annually. So in this budget, we're assuming that our population will hit 15,000, and we have come up with some recommended funding strategies for this additional cost, as well as some phase-in options for the population increase impact, so that our tax rate doesn't have to jump so much in one year. We've put forward in your package about 4 different options, but we've recommended the one option. So some of our other contractual increases are, of course, salaries and wages. We deal with this in each budget year. We have to anticipate and calculate our salary increases based on grid increases as well as inflationary increases that we've already negotiated in our management contracts and in our QP agreement. So within our tax-supported departments, the increase is about $107,000, and we'll look at that when we go through the base budget. And in our utility departments, it totals about $32,000. So our grid and inflationary increases are actually quite a bit higher than that. As well, we've identified some increases in our benefits plan in 2022, and we've also adjusted our budget based on better budgeting techniques as well to make sure that we have a better budget for our benefits. And some of those increases have been offset based on some decreases because of position changes. So some other inflationary impacts. We do anticipate inflation to be an issue in 2022. I've just attached the Alberta, as of October, Alberta CPI is now 4.3%. But we've identified a couple of things that we thought really needed to be addressed moving forward. One is the increase in natural gas and in some cases fuel and oil due to the federal government's carbon tax. So this is a phased-in increase that they're imposing on these expenditures that will have to be adjusted on an annual basis. When we get to the base budget, we can talk a little bit more about what the impact is on that. The other is annual insurance premiums. In 2021, we realized an 8.5% increase for liability and property insurance, and that's kind of an average, blended average. And we do anticipate the same increase at least in 2020. Much of the premium increase is due to the associated risk that in insuring municipal operations. Therefore, I think we have a really good insurance program, but we could be faced with higher increases, but with our insurance program, that's what we're looking at. So again, those total about $77,000 worth of increases for our property tax supported departments and another $32,000 throughout the utility departments. I'll just make mention quickly about our county ICF funds. This proposed budget has incorporated our 2022 ICF revenue that will be received from the County of Newell pursuant to our Intermunicipal Collaboration Framework Agreement. The 2021 ICF revenue has currently not been committed, and in this budget we have utilized that to facilitate part of our phase-in of property tax increases due to the proposed RCMP cost share formula. So I will just move on to just one more comment before we go into the budget, and that is our Municipal Sustainability Initiative, so MSI. So that's one of the major grants that we've been receiving for many years. The city so effective 2022, the allocation that we receive of our MSI will be reduced to 40.6% of what our allocation has been in the past. So our combined allocation, so basically MSI has been separated into, or there's two parts to MSI, MSI Capital and the BMTG, which we fund many of our street improvement projects and some other projects. Combined, those allocations will, for 2022, be approximately $1.4 million, of which in this budget we've committed $882,000, and that's mostly for our street improvements and for a few other projects from the BMTG portion. So we haven't committed our MSI capital, and we have a previous amount of about $971,000, which hasn't been committed from previous years. So hopefully I didn't confuse people more than, anyways. So I'll move on to the proposed increases in this budget. So in regards to our property tax collected, when we do refer to increases, we're referring to the percentage that we increase of the revenue that we need to collect in order to cover our services. We don't really refer to our tax rate. Our tax rate would be determined once we know for sure what our assessment is. So we are referring to the percentage of increase of revenue that we need to collect, just to clarify that. So in the 2022 proposed budget, the required property tax collected is $476,172 more than what we collected in 2021. And that is an increase of revenue of about 3.86%. That includes a 2.1% increase for the RCMP contract, and that is only a phased-in amount. That's not the full impact. And a 1.76% increase for other proposed changes, including the inflationary impacts that were mentioned previously. So in 2021, we levied just under $12,326,000 for the municipal portion of property taxes. Just so when we are talking about increases, that means that a 1% increase in our property tax revenue equates to about $123,826. So in the proposed 2022 budget, the municipal property tax levied total $12,801,997. In regards to our utility rate increases, the proposed 2022 budget increases the required utility user fees by the following amount. Water would be about a 5.1% increase in the revenue, which would, we would see $170,693 of additional revenue. There would be no changes to our surface irrigation user fees. Sanitary sewer would be an increase of $27,680 in revenues, or 1.9% increase. And solid waste services, there are no changes to our user fees except for the cardboard collection fees, which we would require an increase of about $17,242, or a 32% increase on those rates. And commercial garbage collection fees, an increase of about $40,821. And those increases actually reflect the phase-in of the recently approved delivery changes associated with these services. So we will be looking at them a little bit further down in the base budget. So there's a nice little summary which, that just breaks things down into base budget, decision packages, and capital from operating that illustrate our 3.86% increase in revenues that we've collected. I've also put some information in regards to the impacts of those changes that I've just talked about. We like to do our impacts based on residential averages. Our non-residential impacts are very hard to quantify because our non-residential is so broad and different. The assessments are very large, so their property tax impacts can vary quite a bit. But in regards to municipal property taxes, and again, this is just the municipal property tax portion, it doesn't include Alberta Education or seniors housing requisitions that we pass on. So in 2022, if you had an assessment of $235,000, which is about the average in Brooks, your property taxes would be $2,008 based on this new this proposed budget, whereas in 2021, with the same assessment, your property taxes would have been $1,933. That is an increase of $75 per year. With utility rates, I've just done the impacts on water and sanitary sewer because those are the ones that have gone up for the residential services. So our water, I've got a couple of different impacts. Our minimum charge, which is our base rate, includes about 13.65 cubic meters of water. So if you don't use more than that allotment, your annual increase would be about $15.60 per year. For an average family that uses about 60 cubic meters for a 2-month period, which is over that base rate, your annual increase would be about $31.80 a year. And for sanitary sewer rates, for residential basic rates, the increase would be about $4.20 annually. And next, I just put some comparisons to some like municipalities. I tried to choose towns and cities that were close in our population and or in the area of Alberta. These comparisons can be done with any groups of municipalities, but with this particular one, this illustrates that the cities we're very good at keeping our expenses per capita down compared to these other municipalities. We're close to the lowest. The next one, though, shows that our assessment per capita also shows us at the very lowest. So that's one of our challenges. We're good at keeping our expenses down, but we don't have as much assessment per capita as other municipalities if we were to compare our tax rates. So the next two just show where we are with actual residential and non-residential tax rates. And of course, because of that assessment challenge, it shows that our tax rates are higher in comparison. And the last one is just our bragging rights, is our long-term debt per capita. We do very well at that. And then I'll let you flip through to that one. There we go. We're the lowest by far for long-term debt per capita. So we do have funding opportunities in that, but we like to brag that that is in good standing. So I guess I could ask for questions, or if there's any questions in regards to all of that information.
Just on the rec center, you plan or allowed for 50% decrease in revenues. Do you know offhand what the actual decrease was for the year for 2020?
Very good question. Through the chair to Councillor Jessica. I don't have that information in front of me, but I can certainly get that for sure. what our actual increase. I do know that I've prepared a variance report for Monday, so I have information on where we're at in 2021. But as far as 2020, I don't recall the actual decrease. And 2020 was a little bit different because COVID didn't happen until, we did have 3 full months of recreation being full. But I actually don't recall exactly where we were with that. But I will write that down and get that, bring back that information. First question, and I'm not doing so good. That's okay.
Thank you again. Always a thorough job of what you do. Just a quick question. On the citizen budget part, I'd be curious if we could look at the last 3 years. I know, because this is such a small sample, this is 208 people. I'd be curious how it was reflective of the questions a year ago and then post COVID. It'd be just interested to see if our values have changed and if people value policing more now, today, than they did 3 years ago. Just aside, on your spare time.
Yeah,
could work
no,
on that.
that's great. And it would be very easy for us. The company did change, so the way they lay out their presentation is a little bit different. But I think it would, we've kept our budget areas the same, so it would be pretty easy to do a comparison. So that can be done for information purposes.
My other question was, when we talk about our Rcmp contracts, and I know we don't get to decide how much we're paying and not, but I am curious if, when the census does come out in February, if we could request a review of that census to maybe get better at numbers if it's not in our favor of under 15,000.
That is a really good question. I know in the Rcmp contracts, it always is based on the federal census. You know, municipalities, a lot of them will do them annually, and that works for some grants and stuff like that. But that is very specific that it is based on the federal census. So depends on what that number is. We can certainly see what they'll do for us.
Yeah, thank you.
So what you, like if it came in at, let's say, 15,001, and then we did our own census and it came in at 14,999, the federal one would still trump ours, is basically the point on that.
But I mean, is there a way that we could ask the federal government for a review? I know we do our own, but ask for another review because times change, people move, and from when the census was done till when it's released, I think our numbers will look different again.
Again,
The reason is because this is going to cost us a lot of money.
Yes.
In the long run.
You know, I don't know if they'll do the review for us. However, we can't use a different date because the agreement, the Rcmp agreement that we have says the population of that year. So we probably couldn't change the date on that, but if we feel that the census is not correct, we could look at to what process that would be for them to redo it if they even would.
But maybe, Councillor, good enough maybe that what we have to do is lobby for a different funding formula there. So maybe if you're talking to your MLA or MP, maybe we going about it, you know, that way then. Because I don't understand why the 15,000 mark is there from 70 to 90. I've asked our MP on that, and I asked, I think, our MLA on that. I don't know why. It's just an arbitrary number. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. If you want, any other questions then? Okay, Councillor, Idris.
I think this is going to be a newbie question. Just to understand, to confirm that I understand correctly, MSI is something that the province gives the city, the municipality, and right now we have in the savings 971,000, but it's not that we are going to get 40% of that. We are going to get 40% of, there is some sort of a formula that they use that is changing.
Through the chair to Councillor Idris. Yeah, that's correct. And I've put some continuities in the back of our major grant. So our allocation was, I don't have the exact number, but the 1.4 million that we get is exactly 40.6% of what we were receiving annually. And so that was a grant that we had received for several years, and they had changed the program throughout the years with each new budget, provincial budget. But it was obviously something that was a large source of revenue for us, and we knew that eventually that would be cut down and that program would be cut. But I think it's for the next few years that our allocation will be down to the 40.6%.
Which is the 1.4.
The 1.4 million. And that changes too because of the formula, so they do that annually, but it could stay around the same amount. So the amount that we haven't spent from previous allocations is the 971 that I spoke about. So that, and we have not committed that money to future projects.
Okay. So it's fairly then, we use a lot of it every year, because if we used to get like 60% more in the 1.4, that means we were getting a lot of money, we were using that every year.
That's correct, and again, the MSI over the years has enabled us to do major projects. It is something that we can carry forward the money for a certain amount and accumulate it and use it. We used a considerable amount on the JBS expansion, JBS Canada Centre expansion, and we actually did bridge financing. So we borrowed the money for that project and then paid it back with our allocations over 5 years. So without that money, it's harder. It's more of a challenge to do larger projects, and the MSI is a grant that that many of our municipal projects qualified for. So that does present quite a challenge to us in budgeting.
Actually, that was going to be my minor question around, with this huge loss, if we were depending on it that much, how are we going to go forward with that?
So we did use a lot of our MSI allocations for the JBS Canada Centre, and in our 10-year capital plan, we didn't commit any further MSI funds. So we don't have projects that we had planned to do with that funding because we didn't know what was going to happen with it. However, it just does limit our possibilities moving forward. And in 2022, we will be writing a new 10-year capital plan. So obviously, the amount of funding we have available is less than what we've had in previous years.
Thank you.
So we're going to start base budget with our base budget adjustments, and I'm going to try and go through them quickly but thoroughly, and we'll make this not last too long. But so the first 3 pages of this is the summary of all of the adjustments, and I will be going through each one in order of the summary. So I'm going to pull my sheet out, and then we can just move forward with some form of backup or representation of these changes. Basically, they're just based on administration analyzing our base budget and recognizing where the budgets are no longer relevant, or whether we have to initiate some inflationary increases. So the first one, as we spoke before in my introduction, is salaries, wages, and benefits. For each department, we calculate the salaries. This year, we have a new computer program that does it. We've always done it manually, and we've done I think, a fairly good job. It was a little bit tedious doing. We have a computer program now that does it for us. And the benefit of that is that it calculates our employee benefits more accurately, whereas when we were doing it manually, we basically just took a percentage. So now there's a more accurate way of budgeting our benefits. And we did have to increase our budget slightly to increase those modifiers, but it is, again, more accurate of a budget. As well, again, we've accounted for all the grid and inflationary increases, and it's a pretty thorough budget, and it poses an inflationary increase to our tax-supported departments of about $107,000 to what we currently have budgeted in salaries and wages. So the vacancy, we budget based on everybody staying in their position and nobody leaving, and that's not really always realistic. So what we have done for the last several years is we've decreased our salaries and wages by a 0.5% vacancy rate. And that's, I would tell you that in some years that's fairly accurate, in some years it's higher, in some years it's not. But it does at least illustrate that that we don't have a full complement of staff throughout the full year, 100%. So that the adjustment of 536, or the decrease of 536, is just increasing that offset to our salaries and wages. So the total increase is 106,678. So the next one is electricity costs. Now, Bruce has equipped me with a little laser, so I am going to use it. Can you flip through? Yeah, a few more. So we're there now. So typically when I want to adjust the budget, I show what I like to refer to as a bit of a trend analysis. And this one isn't a very good one because it looks very volatile, and it's not actually as volatile as it looks. Do notice, I guess I have to turn this on. Do notice that this graph starts at about $540,000. So this isn't $0 in comparison. So these gaps here aren't quite as large as they look. However, electricity, this is what we've spent in electricity. So these bars here are what we've actually spent in previous years to 2020. We then show what we're forecasting for 2021, and then we're showing what we propose in 2022. This line up here is where our budgets have been at for all of those years. So you can see that in previous years, we've had quite a bit of room in our budget. In 20 and 21, we predict, or we have had smaller amounts, and that's kind of reflects some of our facilities closures. So we used less electricity. 2019 looks a little high. This is the year that we hosted NJAC, and we increased our ice times. That's not the only reason, but throughout some of the departments, our electricity consumption, or our electricity costs were higher, and that could be a hot summer with more air conditioning. There's a lot of variable things with electricity, but basically what we're proposing is to reduce our electricity budget in our tax-supported departments by about $5,000. It appears that we might have more room than that. However, there is an application through EUC for a fairly substantial increase to distribution rates currently, which I'm not sure if it's been proposed or not, and I wanted to allow for those increases. For residential, they're about a 1.7% increase, so I didn't want to take too much out of this. We like to have enough budget to cover our electricity costs. Again, we don't know if we'll be impacted by facility closures, but what we're proposing to do is decrease the budget by $5,000. And you'll see later in the utility department, we're actually just moving that budget into our water department. The next one is a trend analysis on our natural gas. And Bruce, can you just move it up a tiny bit higher? The other way, sorry. Okay, so it just shows the increase here. We're proposing an increase of, I should flip to, of 23,453. So this is mostly due to our carbon tax increase that's being phased in by the federal government. Last year we looked at it and we felt that we had decreased our natural gas budget in the 2020 budget, but we felt that we had enough room to absorb some of that federal gas tax or federal carbon tax that was coming into play. But this year we would require an increase for that. Basically, they have proposed about a 53-cent per gigajoule increase in natural gas going into 2022. And beyond that, we would be looking at about a 78-cent per gigajoule increase each year. So that will have to be considered in all future base budgets. Natural gas, again, is fairly volatile depending on how cold the winter is, but you can see with our trends that we're fairly steady, and this is about where the federal carbon tax came into play, so there's a steady increase there. The next one is insurance, as I had mentioned also in our inflationary issues part. This basically in the budget we propose an increase of $58,384. Part of it is our shortfall because we didn't increase our budget last year. We were being optimistic about what the increases would be, but they did for sure happen. And we are told that they will happen again at the same rate. And again, I did talk about just the risk associated with insuring municipalities and municipal services. The next one is our penalty and costs on taxes, which again, I've spoken about. And clearly you can see in 2020, this is where we reduced our rates. Our penalty rates originally were fairly high. We like to have an incentive for people to pay their property taxes, so we had used that. But when we have economic hardship caused by not only the pandemic, but the economy altogether, sometimes when people have trouble paying their taxes, it's hard to impose more charges on them. So council did reduce those rates, and that is the impact that it's had on our budget, and we felt that it should be addressed. So in our budget, we're proposing to decrease our revenue by $59,000, and that way we wouldn't have to rely on those penalty rates being increased. So it is assuming that our penalty rates will continue at the lower rates. So now we go into RCMP. I've really discussed, I won't go through these spreadsheets in detail, but I'll be happy to answer any questions instead of trying to explain where all the numbers come from. But we did, based on their forecasts, we did anticipate or estimate about $727,730 increase for their retro pay, which again is a one-time basically make-up payment, so that, that would be based on the RCMP officers that the City of Brooks is responsible for. The next is, as I had said before, we quantified what the impact of our population increase, and we're assuming in this case that our population would increase to between 15,000 and 16,667. There would be another change if it went above that, but in this case, that's our assumption. And we do feel that our contracted service coming from the RCMP would increase in this partial year of 2022 from April to December of 607,000. Our grant allocations would also increase slightly, which would offset that impact. But our total impact for the year would be about 603,695. So we have come up with 4 different phase-in amounts, and basically just in the pink is how the amounts would be phased in. Our strategy behind this is that we would be using the 2021 Icf funds that we've collected in 2021 and will have put into the operating contingency reserve, and that amount is approximately 618,000. So that's not our total Icf funds, but that's the Icf funds that weren't previously budgeted for. So some of our negotiations included things that they had already participated in cost sharing. So these are incremental Icf funds that we haven't earmarked yet. And with that reserve balance, we are able to, in option 1, do a 3-year phase-in, where the first and second years our tax increase would have to be 2.1%. So that would be a compounding increase. So we'd increase it 2.1% this year and yet another 2.1% the following year. And the third year would be about a 2.04% increase. What that would do is it would use up the $618,000 that we have in our operating contingency reserve from the Icf funds. But it would produce enough revenue with these increases. This is the amount of taxes we would gain each year, and we would be able to cover the full annual impact. This, of course, doesn't include any other inflationary changes. The second option, so this is the option that we chose and that we have that is represented in this budget. The second option is basically just spreading that out a little bit more. 2% increases, but then it would have to go into a third year. And the issue with that is we actually wouldn't have enough money in our reserves, so we would have to make that up in a future tax increase. But it's still an option. The third option is a 3-year phase-in. And this option limits the amount pulled out of the reserve to the 618. But it is just a different, it's kind of front-ending the impact. So there'd be a higher impact in 2022, and then a little bit less in 2023, and less yet in 2024. So it's just a different way of doing basically the same thing. And then the final option I just wanted to throw in there right away is to not actually address it in this year's budget. And if it did happen, we could fund the first year the prorated year from that reserve. However, in 2023, we would be faced with about a 6.26% increase, which would be a little bit reactionary, and that's one of the reasons we chose option 1. Okay. So moving down the list, I think the most complicated ones are now behind me. We'll go a little bit easier now, I think. Moving down the list, we have a decrease in, I'm just trying to find where I am, I apologize. So we have a decrease in Newell 911. Yeah, can you go, I think I might have just have this out of order. No, you're okay, Bruce, you can go back to where you were. I'm going to guess I have this one out of order. Yeah, I do. So if you want to just go down and skip this one so I can follow the list. So this change here is just changing the budget for the ICF funding. To make a long story short, the county has always contributed to our fire services. The amount that they contributed has changed now a little bit. So they contributed a certain amount, and we put the capital portion of it into reserves. So we had that in our budget. So we're just changing this to reflect the current ICF agreement. And the actual impact is increasing the operational part by about $10,748. It looks as though we're decreasing it, but we're also taking out that reserve, that transfer to reserves. So now we can go back up to the other. No, just one up, Bruce, sorry. One more. So the next change is to reflect a 5-year contract that's been entered into with Newell 911 in regards to their dispatching contract, and this illustrates our 2021 municipal requisition based on the new contract. Our current budget is about $68,000, so we felt we had room to reduce this budget by about $10,000 based on that 5-year contract. We like to see reductions sometimes. So the next one is, do I have this in the right order? Sorry. Yeah, you can pass this one too. Thanks, Bruce. Okay. So the next one is an increase in our municipal enforcement fine revenue. Again, we did some trend analysis on the fine revenue that we were collecting, and we could see that in the past couple of years, we've collected quite a bit more than we've budgeted. Last year, we did increase the budget, but we felt this year, based on our trends of municipal fine revenues, our proactive programs, that we can increase this budget by $8,500. This is a funny one because this is a budget of $600 revenue that we've had in the budget forever, and it was originally put in there with the intent to charge people that were bidding on tenders a small amount, but we haven't done it for years. So we just wanted to remove this. We've not charged this amount, nor have we collected the revenue for it for years, so we're just cleaning this one up. This is our repaving tax that we collect pursuant to our repaving tax bylaw. This is an in and an out because the amount that we collect in repaving tax, it comes in through operations, but we transfer it to our reserve, and we use that for the purposes that the repaving tax bylaw specifies, and that is for our street improvement and repaving program. But we did want to modify our budget and increase it based on current trends, which is a $21,000 increase. but then we turn around and reduce or increase our transfer to reserve by 21,000 as well. So that's a zero impact. The next one is really quite easy. The airport commission approves a budget based on what Dawn takes to them, and it has some inflationary component. So this $139 just aligns our budget with what they've approved. That's all I'm going to say about that, because it's only 130. But it does, we have to kind of align it every year. So these two amounts, the next two amounts have to do with just adjusting our budget for the amount of ICFs that we'll receive for recreation and parks. So although we didn't have built in our budget the ICF revenues in 2021, we brought in our 2020 ICFs when we received them to reduce our taxes, to reduce our non-residential taxes. So we brought that in as a budget adjustment. So we're proposing that we bring in our 2022 revenues, and this just adjusts our 2020 amounts that we had in as a budget adjustment to our 2022 amounts. It's just the inflationary part of the ICF. So that would be an increase in revenues for us. The next one is a request that has already gone to council, and that's the increase for the Shortgrass Library System requisition of $708. So I think you're all familiar with that, because I think it was brought to the new council. And then the very last one is just not the last one, but the last one on this part of the list. Yeah. Is just the inflationary part of the ICFs for culture, and that's $649. Now, as I mentioned in our budget process, we may approve decision packages in 1 year which have an ongoing effect, and therefore we have to add those to our base budget the following year. So I'm going to go through each of the decision packages. Some of them are decreases and some of them are increases, but I'll go through each of them very quickly. But these were the decision packages, and as you can see, I've just marked that as they're ongoing, this is where they have to be added to the base budget. So this first one was a decrease that we made to the budget in 2021, which was the elimination of the Christmas Gala for $21,632. So if, assuming that this was approved as an ongoing decrease, so now it is being added to the base budget. The next one is also a decrease, and that is the elimination to our staff wellness budget. So in 2020, we eliminated parts of our staff wellness budget, not just our staff wellness, but some staff allowances. And we did keep $5,000 in the budget to accommodate some staff wellness initiatives. But it too was added as an ongoing decision package, an ongoing decrease to our budget of $8,052. The next was a decision package that was approved with ongoing consequences as well, and that is Zoom video conference licensing, which is now a fairly big part of everyone's life. The next one is a decision package that was added to purchase and to implement the Smart Squad e-ticketing. There was a legislative portion to this, but basically it was approved last year, and there is an ongoing expense in regards to licensing costs of $6,000 per year. So that too is added to the base budget. This municipal energy manager one was back from 2020. It's really a 2-year term, but because the term started in the beginning of the year, it's not finished altogether. We have 2 months left, January and February. So the amount is being removed from the base budget, all but those 2 months. Another reduction that happened last year in 2020 is the elimination of the HR referral program. And that equated to about $2,572 per year on an ongoing basis. So that reduction as well has been added, as well as the reduction of the HR training and development budget. Again, proposed last year and has an ongoing effect. We also approved a reduction in parks maintenance contracted services, and that was ongoing, and the effect of that is $5,200 a year, so that reduction can now be added to the base budget, as well as the parks turf maintenance contracted services, which is $12,000 per year. The last one is we did do a change in our handy bus specialized service. We chose an option to contract out the ambulatory services to local cab companies, and we estimated what that impact would be. And we estimated it to be a $20,100 per year ongoing cost. And can you move to the next one, Bruce? There's a little, I just kind of threw together a little bit of spreadsheet. And that was, this was the original savings. So $33,000 would be in wages and benefits. And these three amounts here, a reduction in fuel and oil, insurance, and an increase in contracted services would be the cost. So in the base budget, the wages and benefits are taken care of already in our salaries and wages increase. It's been incorporated in that. So it's just these three amounts here. And we've kind of analyzed this contracted service increase and decided that this was a fairly conservative estimate, and we felt that we could reduce that amount for an ongoing basis down by about $10,000, and therefore our ongoing costs would, instead of being these three amounts, which was $13,752, would be down to $3,752. Now, the estimate of that contracted service could be impacted by COVID. We'll have to reanalyze that next year. But at this point, we didn't think adding that full contracted cost was necessary. So altogether, the decision packages that we passed last year that had ongoing effects decrease our base budget by about $51,454. So that is the base budget, proposed base budget changes. Again, I realize it's a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, yes, sure, I can do that first. So we will go through the utility-based budgets. So this summary sheet I kind of have all on one sheet, which for this purposes I could have probably done that a little easier. Sorry, I closed my book, now I have to re-find myself. Okay. So as mentioned before, I think what we'll do is we'll just go through salaries and wages and benefits for all of them. So interestingly enough, there's some different impacts for each function, but we do have many workers in Public Works that allocate their time to different departments. Many of them go from transportation department to water, sewer, and basically in the budget, we have to estimate how they're going to allocate their time. So we've also adjusted the allocations in this, and that's why it's not really consistent across the board. But with this, we've recognized an increase in water of about 49,872, less the 249 in vacancy adjustments. In surface irrigation, a small adjustment down of 2743. Sewer, we're only adjusting down about $52 altogether. And in waste management, a small adjustment down of what was previously allocated in the budget of about $14,579. And we do that based on what we forecast this year and certain trends of where their utility workers are allocating their time. I think we'll go through the water changes now. So I think, again, you can go up. One more. So when we looked at our electricity, we did decrease it for our tax-supported departments, but we recognize that the water utility, our trends show that our electricity charges are more than what we have budgeted. So we are proposing an increase of $5,000, the $5,000 that we took out of our tax-supported departments. The next one is fuel and oil. Again, through trend analysis, we're proposing an increase of $3,415. This also takes into account the proposed carbon tax, which also is being phased in. In 2022, there is a $10 per ton of carbon tax on certain types of fuels and oils. And again, that's phased in every year. So we'll have to revisit our fuel and oil budgets. And fuel and oil is a tricky one as well to know, because it's, especially with COVID, in certain areas we haven't been out and about as much. And so I've always loved doing our trend analysis. As soon as 2020 hit, and for many cases, it was no longer as relevant as what it had been in previous years, because it was a very different year, and 2021 is not much different. But this looks fairly steady, and we recognize that we needed to increase the budget. So the next one is the increase in the cost per cubic meter that Newell Regional Services charges us for water rates. And in their budget, they've increased their charges 5 cents per cubic meter to $1.05 per cubic meter. Based on the cubic meters that we've spent in the last few years that we've used, an average, you can move up, that's just an email confirming it. The impact of that would be about $112,655. So for water, the total increase is $170,693 of revenues that we need to collect in addition to what we collected last year to cover those additional charges, which is what the 5.1% makes up. Moving on to surface irrigation, the only other change besides salaries and wages is a very small increase in insurance, just to keep the budget relevant and not move behind on it. With surface irrigation, though, we decreased the amount of salaries and wages being allocated there. Therefore, in total, they had a decrease of revenues required. of about 2,442. So we're proposing just to increase that reserve transfer. So we do a reserve transfer each year with our user fees. We anticipate collecting money, enough money to replace our infrastructure, and therefore we put that money into reserves and use it to replace the infrastructure. So this would reduce our reserve transfer. In sewer, other than the small change in salaries and wages, we do recognize an increase for natural gas, which does account for the carbon tax increase. And that is a proposed increase in total of about $10,931. You can move on, Bruce. We also look at fuel and oil in sewer, proposed increase of $6,130 is proposed. And insurance, to accommodate the inflation, we're proposing an increase of $10,671. This department was hit a little harder because of environmental liability that the insurance that we hold on our lift stations. So it's specifically impactful for the sewer department. So that the total of all the sewer changes come to an increase of $27,680, and that is what the 1.9% increase is made up of. So waste management, we incorporated the changes in salaries and wages, which was a reduction based on the allocation. We've also put in an increase of about $3,489 to accommodate for multifamily pickup. This is based on a 3% increase in 2022. This actual contract has not been awarded yet, so we're unsure what the reality will be, but we made an assumption of a 3% increase in this case, and accounted for that inflation for the multifamily contract. The next sheet is, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I won't go through this in huge detail. This is just an analysis of the amount that we would need to accommodate our, this top part is our cardboard collection contract. The contract on an annual basis would be $130,000. It would be offset by an increase in rates. And in our plan that was approved, it would also be offset by a decrease in salaries. However, that decrease in salaries, we're assuming that that would happen by eliminating a position through attrition, not eliminating it in this budget. So we didn't account for that savings in this budget. Perhaps in future budgets when, if a position isn't rehired, then we could account for the savings. However, we determined that we would need about $86,872 based on the way we would phase the program in starting in about April. With the increase in costs, we would accommodate that for the full year. And then we also accounted in the phase-in of that increase of this program over 5 years. And what that would account for is that we would have to use, we would see our rates increase enough to recover $17,000, just over $17,000 in revenues. However, we would have to use $630,000 from our reserves in this year. That trend would carry on. We would do the phase-in of increases and have to pull a certain amount from our reserves at a lesser rate each year for those 5 years if we were to phase in the rate increases. Garbage collection, just go back one more time. Garbage collection's much the same way. Our contract, our additional contract is 296,000. This is our proposed phase-in. So we say we need to recover $111,435 in expenses. Our phased-in increase in rates would recover $40,821, and we would subsidize that, the full increase from our reserves of about 70,000. So how confusing is that? Yeah. So that is our base budgets. With that, I will say for waste management, the only increases that we would see only increases for the cardboard collection rates and the commercial garbage rates. Regular residential rates would not be affected based on the changes to this base budget. So those are the base budget changes. And again, I apologize for a ton of information in a short period of time, but am happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions? We'll probably go, because maybe go until about 5:30, then we'll break then, or 5:20, or 5:30 work? 5:30 works, and then we'll break for about 10 minutes then, but, so continue on then, yeah. Okay, Councillor Waldrop.
And this might be a newbie question too, but my question's about the insurance increases. So the 8.5% is, I can't remember if you said that was a typical increase. It seems very high. And I guess the other part of my question is you said a couple of times due to the increasing risk factors for insuring municipalities. Could you clarify that for me too?
Yes. Through the chair to Councillor Wardrop. I will try to clarify that. And Amanda, if you want to help me, we have a meeting each year going through our insurance package. So 8.5% is a very high rate. They warned us last year that we could be seeing inflation of that approximate that amount. Now, we have several different types of policies. Some of them went up more, some of them didn't go up that much, but that's kind of the blended amount. And when we met with our with AMSC, who handles our insurance, they also said that we could expect that increase this year. Part of the increased risk has to do with certain carriers for certain types of insurance pulling out and basically saying that we're no longer interested in insuring not only municipal operations, but just high-risk operations, properties. A good example is that environmental liability protection that we have on our lift stations. With the risk being so high to them, the carriers that they assemble to put our insurance package together, many of them are pulling out, and they're having to shop the market for new ones. And when they do, the tenders that are coming in are extremely higher than what we've been seeing in the past. Why there's a huge risk factor, I'm not going to try and answer that, but we do have a presentation that was given to us. If you're interested in looking at it, the slides, it's very interesting. And at the time, you learn a lot. As a matter of retaining all that information, not so well. But we can certainly give you more information in regards to that. It's very enlightening when we talk to them.
So is there, because you said this is kind of a blended rate across like different plans or whatever, is there a particular area that is costing more? And is there like, are there maybe prevented, or do you know what I'm trying to say? Are there things that we could do maybe to be proactive about maybe getting hit so hard in those areas? Is this, if this keeps happening, that doesn't seem very sustainable, like 8.5% year after year.
So through the chair to Councillor Wardrop, I'm going to answer this fairly loosely too. Obviously, keeping our claims low would help our personal rates for sure. And I think that preventative maintenance and as far as our property insurance goes, all of those things are things that through our asset management we try to do. In regards to liability, we have safety programs and, you know, I think there's lots of mitigating actions that we can take from year to year, but I don't think that there's anything we can present them to say, you know, we deserve lower rates. However, again, I can certainly bring back a little bit more information based on how they calculate those increases. And again, I think the whole state of the economy with the COVID pandemic, there's lots of things that are affecting those large increases. And certainly in the past, we haven't seen them this erratic as we are seeing them now. It's been a long time since we've increased our insurance budget. But I don't know if you want to add anything, Amanda.
Just one comment is that it's not specific to municipalities because it is it's globally. So everyone's being affected in all types of industry, not just in municipal government.
And just to add to that, there is a breakdown of our increases last year that show which policies went up higher. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I can certainly get that information for you. Should we move on to decision packages? Okay. So I'm happy to move on to decision packages, mostly because I let the department managers present their own decision packages. So you don't have to listen to my voice as much. I am going to talk about the first one. This was an assumption made, which an assumption was made based on the first one is the Brooks Public Library. Again, I have a summary sheet and I'll be going through each of these in the same order as they are on the list. So we did make an assumption that the Brooks Public Library would be asking for a requisition increase based on their financial information that they submitted to us, which is a requirement of any of the community associations that we help fund. They are doing a presentation to council on Monday, so we'll get more information. And they aren't asking for anything. So we can say that this request is likely not needed based on now the information that we have in their request. So I'm going to turn the next one over to community development. Lisa will speak about the SPEC Makerspace program funding.
Thank you, Shelley. So before you have a decision package for the SPEC Makerspace program, SPEC operates a makerspace out of a building that we currently manage, the old county building, or we formally call it the Youth Development Center. And they've been in there since 2018, and over the years, the city has supported them as they get their programming up and running. We have historically provided them with free rent of the space and a $20,000 amount of cash for them to use as they see fit. 2020 and 2021 were hard years for Makerspace, just with closures. Their original plan had been to become self-sufficient within 4 years, but due to obvious pandemic problems, they are not self-sustaining quite yet. So there's also some backup information there from the spec executive director. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I did contact Amanda again, just for a little bit more information in regards to what their long-term financial sustainability plans were, what this $20,000 goes towards, and their current usage in terms of students attending the Makerspace. So if you'd like that information, I can share it as well.
So the next one is actually Amy Romans's. As she's not here, Amanda is going to present that.
Thank you, Shelley. So before you, you have two decision packages from Municipal Enforcement. The first one is a decision package for Stalker Lidar, and this is a handheld unit that Municipal Enforcement officers use to detect speeding vehicles. Administration is recommending to purchase another Lidar to allow both officers the ability to enforce speed at the same time. The department does currently have one, but if an additional one is purchased, more time can be spent on speeding enforcement. You just want to take a note there that administration recommends that this be purchased without a tripod, and that this cost actually be absorbed in operations, as it is expected to increase municipal fine revenues. So therefore, no increase in the budget is necessary as relates to this decision package. The next one that comes from Municipal Enforcement is a decision package on decreasing BAPS funding. And this is to decrease emergency funding that is provided to BAPS. The following is the proposal for 2022. It's just to maintain the $10,000 for capital expenses and decrease the $20,000 emergency operating expenses to $5,000. However, to support BAP's request to increase the retainer fee to $2,500 from $2,000 per month from this funding. Out of the $20,000, $6,000 will be provided to BAPS through the increase in the retainer fee, with another $5,000 available for emergencies. So you will see that total cost would be the ongoing $9,000.
Okay, and then I'm going to turn it over to Randy in regards to the sensor replacement. And actually, she can carry on with the next 3 decision packages, one of which I forgot to put in the package, but I did send that after. Randy.
Right, through the chair to mayor and council. So the first decision package is the sensor replacement. So of course, areas of the recreation facilities, such as the chlorine and ozone rooms at the pool and the ammonia ice plants at the arenas, all contain potentially hazardous chemicals. So these areas, we have sensors installed in them to detect if any of those hazardous chemicals are present prior to staff or contractors entering those spaces. So these are required for safety reasons to prevent exposure to those chemicals, and these sensors are required to be replaced on a regular basis. So depending on the sensor, the replacement timeline can be anywhere between 1 to 2 years or 5 to 8 years, and there's a total of 10 sensors that on our replacement schedule. 4 of these we were able to replace in 2021, and the remaining 6 will need to be replaced in 2022 in order to comply with this replacement schedule. The initial cost to replace these old sensors with the new ones will incur more costs than replacements the following years, and that's just simply because the controllers that contain the sensors need to be replaced as well at first. So the cost for replacements will be $2,000 to $5,000 per year, depending on the number of sensors that need to be replaced. So for 2022, the cost will be $16,000 to replace the 6 sensors and controllers, and then $2,000 per year for the following 3 years. The next decision package are the underwater lights at the EID Aquatic Center. So there are 29 underwater lights in the wave pool, the lazy river, and the lap pool. These are important for safety. They allow our lifeguards to have a clear view into the pool to ensure the safety of patrons, and also allow patrons to see certain features in the pool like stairs and ramps and stuff as they exit the pool. Particularly important when we have early morning swims where the lights are dimmed a little bit more, or during like movie swims where the lighting is lower. It's recommended to replace the lights in the wave pool in 2022, the lazy river in 2023, and the lap pool in 2024, and then have them on a 15-year replacement schedule. So we currently have halogen bulbs in the pools, and they are wired in a series. So there could be 3, 4, 5 bulbs in a series. And when one of the bulbs go out, unfortunately, all of the bulbs in that series go out. And the halogen bulbs that we have in there now have been replaced with LED. So the current model of halogen is no longer available, only the LED is available. The LED bulbs do have higher efficiency and a longer lifespan, but they do come at quite a significant cost. We did look at seeing if there was an adapter that would allow us to use a different halogen bulb in our current niches in the pool, and that didn't exist for this model. And the other option would require jackhammering the concrete out of the pool wall, which we want to avoid because that could cause a lot more issues. So the costs proposed in that 3-phase plan is $38,400 for 2022, $40,000 in 2023, and $32,000 in 2024. We are looking into potential grants to help offset these costs, so there are some energy saving grants available that we're hoping we can get to help with this project. The third decision package is the replacement of the ozone system for the hot tub and wave pool. So this was scheduled in the 2020 as part of the 10-year capital plan at a cost of $100,000 and has been deferred. So what ozone does is it's an enhanced disinfection method basically to help those pools that have higher bather loads and warmer temperatures, just maintain that water chemistry. So it works in conjunction with the chlorine system to maintain water quality regulations and standards. The current ozone system is unreliable. It goes down a lot. It's really difficult to find parts. Repairs are costly, and ozone systems in general in pools are becoming obsolete. So when we were looking at options for replacement, we found what is called an activated filter media. And we thought we would like to try this out rather than replacing the ozone outright. So what we're recommending is replacing the hot tub filter with activated filter media. And what this filter media does is actually enhance filtration, which results in less organic materials going through the filters, so less disinfection is required, so you still kind of get the same effect. We did check references on other pools that have used this, and it has gone well. The AFM lasts longer than other filter media, so we wouldn't have to replace it as often as the sand that we currently have in our filters. And if it works in the hot tub, which is a really good pool to try it out on because it's a smaller volume of water, higher bather load, and warmer temperature. So if it works in the hot tub, we expect we would be able to replace the sand in the wave pool filters with AFM as well at a significantly lower cost than replacing the ozone. So the cost for those filters would be about $19,000 in 2023.
Thanks, Randy. The next, I will turn it over to Alicia for the asset manager decision package.
Thank you, Shelley. Through the chair to mayor and council. In 2021, the city completed an asset management needs assessment, and it laid out a 5-year plan to move our asset management program from our current state to a maturity level 3, which is competent based on the 7 themes in the ISO 550,001 standards. And based on this report, council approved hiring an asset manager on a 2-year term. Since the needs assessment laid out a 5-year plan, and then there would still be a constant need to continue to update and move our asset management program forward, the Asset Management Committee feels there'd be a benefit in making this position permanent. It would also help to attract an experienced asset manager for the position. The position could be partially funded by our asset management budget carried forward from 20 and 21, and then our annual budgets from 2022 and beyond. This would leave a budget for essential supplies and as well as training and travel, and so it would have a 0 impact in 2022 and 2023, with a $40,200 impact in 2024, and then $52,251 moving forward.
Okay, next is the cemetery building roof repair, and I'll turn it over to Don, and I think there's the next 2 he can address.
Okay, through the chair to mayor and council. This one's for the cemetery building roof repair, and right now the shingles on the building are in pretty bad shape, and they're in need of replacement. So we're looking at $7,500 to replace them to ensure that that building doesn't start to leak. The next one is a linear trails and beautification master plan. So the linear trails and beautification program enables the city to expand existing linear trails and connect important landmarks. In addition, this program focuses on beautification of public areas surrounding the trails. A linear trails and beautification master plan will provide direction for the future of this program. The plan would focus on the community as a whole and could incorporate the downtown as well as the highway corridor to improve the city's ability to attract tourism, as well as provide a usable active transportation network that does not provide for motorized vehicles. The Trails and Beautification Master Plan would provide direction for the linear trails program. Administration recommends that this plan be funded from the Linear Trails and Beautification Capital Program funds. And that is an amount of $50,000.
Thanks, Don. And now, I think Bruce is going to, are you going to talk from behind there, or are you going to switch places? Okay. Yeah. We'll get Bruce up here. He is going to talk about security as a service, that decision package.
Through the chair to mayor and council, we're proposing a security as a service, which you may have attended the AMA conference up in Edmonton in the past couple of weeks. Cybersecurity is the #1 concern of every IT department across the country. It used to be that only Fortune 500 companies were impacted. Now every size of organization, from the very small to the very large, are being impacted by cyber criminals. This is an issue that is impacting all facets of business. Security as a service allows the city to address these issues head-on without needing the necessary human resources that otherwise would be required to protect the city's IT resources. Staff is recommending a phased-in approach over 2 years. In year 1, we are proposing implementing a managed endpoint antivirus detection and response, or EDR, solution for $70,000 per year, minus the $6,500 that would be saved from discontinuing the existing antivirus solution. In year 2, we'd be implementing the Security Information and Event Management, or SIM, for $29,420 per year, plus the annual renewal of the EDR solution of $63,500. The city's ongoing annual cost, once fulfilled, once fully implemented, I should rather say, will be $91,920, of which $6,500 is in our current operating budget, leaving us a net operating increase of $85,420. You'll notice in the costing, it's $63.50 in 2022. In 2023, it increases slightly. That's because you're paying for both the existing plus the new that is coming in, and then it will decrease in 24 and 25 once the system is, or once the security as a service project is fully implemented.
Thanks, Bruce. The next decision package is Cupid Negotiations. And we will have Richard.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor and Council. So the proposed package is for QP negotiations, and this is a collective bargaining agreement which pertains to union staff, which typically covers things like wages, hours, and breaks. The current QP policy typically they last 4 years, so this is ending December 31st, 2022. And negotiations are proposed to occur during the first quarter of 2022, and the bulk of the negotiations we have in fourth quarter of 2022, which is why I'm proposing a $15,000 budget for 2022, and hopefully wrapping up first quarter of 2023 with $10,000 budgeted for that quarter.
Thanks, Richard. The next one, the next decision package is mine, or I will present. So this is an increase that we have, kind of a compounding increase that we started after we did our last 10-year capital plan rewrite, which was almost 4 years ago. What we did is we recognized that in our equipment replacement reserve, which we fund 50% of all of our equipment and vehicle replacements, it didn't have enough money and enough source of revenue to sustain our 10-year capital replacements. So to make our asset management, the replacement of our assets once they've expired and reached their useful life, so that we can continue to provide services, in order to see that through, we came up with a bit of a plan to replenish that reserve so that we had the funds in that reserve to replace those equipment and vehicles as needed. The original plan basically increased $32,000 per year as an ongoing expense. So each year, as again it's compounding, so each year we would propose to increase the 32,000, and that would be ongoing, and the next year we would propose another 32,000 increase. And the original plan spanned out over the 10 years, the end of our 10-year capital plan is 2028, would recover about 60% of that shortfall. The shortfall in our reserve we estimated to be $3,174,000. So that would recover $1.9 million. And we felt that the remaining 40% would be mitigated through longer replacement schedules, better preventative maintenance, and deferring the replacements when necessary by good asset management practices. So in 2021, we postponed this, so we did not do the increase for 2021. So in order to make that up, we would have to change that amount to $41,000 per year, but we felt that maintaining it at $32,000, even with it with us not implementing the increase last year, we would still recover about 1.6, just over 1.6 million to accommodate that shortfall. And again, through good asset management practices, we could mitigate the necessary requirements so that we wouldn't have to replace our assets at quite the expense or at the rate that we would. So the request is to implement the increase of $32,000 a year so that each year the additional $32,000 can be put into the vehicle equipment replacement schedule to accommodate those replacements. And the final one in the tax-supported departments, which is the light gray, is the public consultation platform. So I will send it to Lisa.
Thank you. Each year we seek community feedback on our annual budget. As you all know, we just heard the presentation. And historically, we've used a program called Citizen Budget. It was purchased by another software company in 2019, and since then we've noticed a significant decrease in functionality, and as such, we started looking towards some other options. One of the options is Bang the Table, and one of the nice things about that is we could use it potentially throughout the entire year across all departments, giving our community consultation a bit more consistency and coordination and strategy. Our public participation policy requires us to seek community feedback on the annual budget, but judging from this year's citizen budget, 82% of the people that filled out the survey would like to see more consultation on different processes. So what's presented here is a scaled down version that we would use for just budget consultation, but there is an opportunity to scale up and use it throughout the year. And we wouldn't necessarily have to go with Bang the Table. We could do an RFP to see which programs exist.
So that concludes the tax-supported decision package, but there is a one decision package that I'll turn over to Dawn for raw water irrigation expansion plan, or to Alicia, sorry. Just noted that it would be funded from the water surface irrigation reserve.
Thank you, Shelley. The city's source of irrigation water is Lake Stafford. The raw water irrigation expansion plan would provide specific details involving water quality, additional sources, future needs to determine pump and intake requirements. Upon completion of the plan, the city will have direction on the correct steps, including cost on what to move forward on to expand the irrigation system. And as Shelley mentioned, it's going to be funded from the water and surface irrigation reserve.
That is part of it. That is correct.